You know, really like my a bit twisted merchandise, got T-shirts and things like that. Um, last one of my last videos, a friend of mine talked about how I shouldn't hang out with ancient Hebrews and live here. But the main reason I actually find it fascinating really is there is this idea of it's called the apocalyptic thinking, that there's a strong streak of the force of light versus the force of darkness. Everybody wants to be the force of light. Uh, the force of what's true. Some people want to be the force of darkness, but they think it's what's true. And you need to eliminate those other people. And at some point, there's going to be this big clang in heaven, and God's going to appear and, you know, take home the good people, and all the rest of us are screwed. That sort of showed up a few hundred years before time of Christ. So it didn't start with him. Um, there's some of it in Platonism. There's some of it in the Cynics, things like that. It was a big change from the like a lot of the original thought was, well, the gods, like explaining why is you're being a nice person and trying to raise your crops, and all of a sudden the river floods and runs everything. Well, that's a god, and so you have to appease that god. And gods are kind of like this big protection racket thing where certain gods were in charge of certain places, like various physical things that happen. You'd go there and appeal to them by making sacrifices or giving food to them or something like that. But the idea that they were necessarily your friend wasn't prevalent. But starting around, like, sorry, like in Greeks, the idea of being enthused was we were like this thoughtless clay, and the gods would put an idea or emotion or something to do, and they would enthuse us with their desires. And so, the gods would be bored, and they'd have a bunch of us stand up and get spears and stab each other and gut on it. So they weren't necessarily our friends, but we had to like appeal to them and hope our God won, because there was this tendency to everybody to slaughter each other. I know some people read in the Bible it's how horrible it is because God is always causing that to happen, and people are always completely slaughtering everybody. But that's apparently what people did back then. And in a way, it's not unusual because, when you're born, your mother bleeds and you're covered in blood. And when you kill an animal to eat it to stay alive, it bleeds. And when you die, it bleeds. And it seems like these gods all want blood. The idea that something else was going on took a long time to show up in human writings. It's all assumed what was written down had anything to do with what people believed. But, nowadays people say all sorts of things on YouTube. I don't know that anybody actually believes it. I think they're just trying to get a rise out of people and make money. Who knows? But anyway, so the apocalyptic thought process, which is very much going on, you have the Merkava system where you can actually behold the throne of God and see God, but that isn't quite to the apocalyptic view of the end times were here and the horn's about to blow and we're all going to go wherever. It is pretty prevalent by the time you get to the book of Daniel, and what is referred to by non-Jewish people as the Old Testament. And then, seems pretty clear John the Baptist and Jesus were apocalyptic because, they talk about being judged in the end of times, like that. Paul seems to have it, And then it's kind of carried on through history. One of the big ongoing fights in Western Europe was that there was this Germanic versus Jewish tension all through Western history. Kind of comes down to who could claim to be the source of Christianity, because there was a bunch of different types of Christianity until Constantine kind of imposed one. But then the Roman Empire fell apart, and it was later on that the Holy Roman Empire got established. And it's, I believe, when the whole hierarchical structure and a lot of the beliefs we have about how we're going to, go up into heaven when we die, I think that all starts there. So the Germans place a very strong claim on the actual source of completed Christianity. But the other source, of course, is the Jews. Jesus was Jewish. A lot of people seem to forget Jesus was Jewish, he wasn't Christian. But there's just that whole expectation that if only something got cleaned up, a brand new world would start up. The communists were trying to wipe out the capitalists, so a perfect world order would start up. The Nazis trying to wipe out the Jews. Islam trying to wipe out anybody who's not Islamic. Jewish people now are trying to kill a bunch of people in the Middle East so they can have their country secure, I guess. But there's always this idea that those people have to be wiped out. And somehow I'll get some reward. I don't know, it's really weird for me to watch. There seems to be a lot of food around, and they're all just fine if we all just share it, but people seem to be, at least some people seem to be bound and determined to keep shooting each other and raping and pillaging. But it is, this apocalyptic thought process is pretty prevalent in European and American culture. And I assume Canadian. It's how prevalent it was in Asian countries that Christianity got over there, but there was always this idea that you want to be on the side of the redeemed and try and convert those people who aren't redeemed. And someday the day of judgment happens and we all get called back up to life, and the good people, the redeemed, go to heaven, and the rest of us are, kind of screwed. Well, it's not actually even heaven, it's the city of God, now that I think of it. But it doesn't seem to be a lot of, in history. Not sure about just people's normal life. In history, the idea of just hanging out, being friendly, and enjoying the neighbors and sharing with each other, making sure everyone's taken care of, that doesn't seem to show up much historically. Then again, most history writes about wars and politics and things like that. It may have very little to do with what's actually going on in real life. But still, I'm just fascinated by reading about this stuff because, Nietzsche has it. Hegel has it. It's just this, we're all climbing toward this perfection mentally, the perfect explanation of life. Constantly entranced by the perfect explanation of life. Again, as I've mentioned many times, problem is that's an explanation of life. It's not life. And then you die, and what good did all that do you except you sat around and thought a bunch of stuff, thought you were really smart. But anyway, that's the apocalyptic worldview is, I think, kind of a good thing because it makes us strive, but it seems to be a real albatross around a lot of people's lives. It's not even clear when you read the Gospels, because the Gospels were written after Paul's letters, and Paul talks very much about in this kind of a mindset. The Gospels don't actually talk that way, large sections of them. There are some sections where, like when you get to John, it's very apocalyptic. But the rest of them seem to be, how do you, what are you supposed to do? And Jesus says, love the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbors as you love yourself. It doesn't say a whole lot about going up into heaven and becoming a saint or anything. That all just kind of developed over history as we all kind of became more and more apocalyptic. Anyway, that's why I'm fascinated by it, because, watch our political parties argue each other, assuming they actually mean anything, Remember Chuck Norris putting out an ad saying, if Obama was elected, it would introduce 10,000 years of darkness. And, there's back when, what was his name? Johnson was running against Barry Goldwater. They had a commercial where a nuclear bomb gets dropped, or Barry Goldwater would drop and start World War III, and that was going to be apocalyptic, and just all these big, strident, those people are stupid, we're the ones who knows what's going on. And now America seems to be extremely tense about, mostly fueled by a bunch of narcissists who just want to lie on media to make money. Hard to tell. They don't seem to be worshiping God. They worship my God. God is the one that agrees with my opinions, and it's all about me. I'm worshiping me, not God. But I don't think the Bible calls you to worship yourself. Anyway, that's why I'm interested in apocalyptic stuff. I would suggest you look and see if you have any of that in you, and how it might be an albatross around your neck. Because everyone was expecting it 2,000 years ago, and it didn't show up. And yet, whatever seems to be running this place, life just kind of goes on, with or without apocalyptic thought. So who or what is in charge, if there is someone, doesn't seem to be concerned about that. Okay, thanks. As usual, if you're interested, got my a bit twisted mug here. There's t-shirts, there's pants, there's actually a beach towel. So go check it out at Cafe Press. You can see it at dsmccarron.com. And thanks. Hope you're well. And as always, if you want to send some support through my website, I appreciate it. But more importantly, if you know somebody needs help around the neighborhood, help them. All right. Thank you. Bye.